Hello, everyone. Gary Reasons here. Hey, this is your Reasons to Believe moment. Today is Friday, and Friday is before the divisional playoffs in the National Football League, this big weekend of these divisional games coming up. And I think we're going to see some really pretty fun stuff. One of the things I want to look at, and I'm going to give you my picks here at the end of the video on the NFL playoffs, but let me talk about one of the things that I think is going to be paramount for each of these teams as they go into this weekend, and it's all about leadership. Yeah, leadership, and leadership under pressure in particular, because the divisional playoffs, they teach us a few things about winning when it matters, and that's when the pressure is on. So this big weekend, there's going to be the smallest of margins and probably going to be some of the biggest spotlights of these players in their careers. So you talk about me and what I've been involved with this. Well, I've got a couple of Super Bowl games under my belt and 30 years in the broadcast booth. So I'm going to take a little bit of a spin here on the leadership and how it all comes down to playing in this weekend. This is the thing that we're going to talk about: leadership under pressure. And what does pressure reveal in leadership? Well, championship moments, some of those things are exposing preparation. That's exactly what happens. You have to prepare to win. And when you have championship moments that arise, are you prepared? Well, and that's when stress also arises. There's some communication that either sharpens or actually collapses along this path, and leadership needs to step up. Leaders either slow the game down or they speed it up. It's their choice. They have the ability to do that. And here's a leadership takeaway. Pressure just doesn't always create leaders, but it reveals them. That's something that is pretty cool, because leaders are really that dynamic. One of the things I want to share about is, how do you prepare and how does that show up in your execution? Well, what you really don't see is that the game's not won on Sundays or Saturdays, in this case in the playoffs, but the practices are all paramount. This all work goes back in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leading up to these games. And that includes film study and the repetition, the practices. And then you have to have all these different things. And championships, they're going to be built long before the kickoff. That's going to be consistent. And to tie this all into what happens potentially in business, you also have leadership, but you have to meet deadlines, and things are in the boardroom. You can talk about different crisis moments. That's all going to be on display here in this NFL weekend, because that's what these things are. They're just leadership moments that are going to be big. So leadership takeaway here for this is, I think that the biggest moments, execution reflects preparation. That's pretty nice. So when you have the things that are going to go on this weekend, you want to have what it looks like under pressure. So these teams are going to deal with road environment. There's going to be injuries. They're going to have expectations that they're going to have to meet. What about clock management? Well, that's where the leadership all comes into play most. Some of the things we'll look at for some of these players, and what we'll talk about, is quarterback decisions. Yeah, coaching adjustments and some of the body language after, maybe an adversity situation. And, I think for you guys, what you're going to watch is how these guys are going to be composed and how they communicate, and some of the situational execution, because that's exactly what needs to happen. These just aren't football lessons, guys. These are leadership lessons. And so how does that tie to business and leadership? Well, there's obviously things that leaders can face, because there's market pressure. There's going to be team morale challenges within your organization, high stakes business decisions. There's a lot of different things that go on to it. And so you ask yourself, are you prepared for that moment? Do you, trust your leadership when it matters? Well, there's a few things that these players are going to find out over the course of these divisional playoffs. Well, I teased you at the top where I said I was going to tell you my picks for this weekend, and well, here they are. In Buffalo versus Denver, I have to go with the Bills. I think that Josh Allen and his experience, I think it's his time. He's been there time in, time out, but I think that he needs to going to get this one in the win column for Buffalo. And then you have the 49ers versus the Seahawks. This is a pick-em game for me, really, because I think that the Seahawks and Darnold gets it done ultimately in the end, because he's just had such a superlative year and he's playing lights out. I just think he has enough. I think that the 49ers have been playing a little bit on borrowed time, and they haven't been as consistent as they need be. Then you go to Houston and New England. Well, I like this pick because I think the Patriots and what they've done under Mike Vrabel and his leadership, it really is going to show up again here. They've had a magical season, and I think that the Patriots are really going to shine here at the end. Lastly, let's talk about the Rams and the Chicago Bears. Well, I'm going to pick the Bears at this one. It's going to be at home. It's going to be a good opportunity for them. They've showed, I think, some really good resiliency over the course of the season. And Caleb Williams, well, he's a guy that really I think is shining right now, and I think he's going to get it done. So that's the divisional playoffs and my picks here for this weekend. We'll check in on next week, but this week we've talked about this leadership opportunity, and let's see who shines through leadership over the course of the divisional playoffs. Take care, everybody.